Alaska in 1890 was not for the faint of heart. It was a land of unforgiving winters, towering mountains, and biting silence. In the logging settlement of Willow Creek, life was a constant battle against the elements. Rough, calloused men toiled from dawn till dusk, their gruff laughter echoing among the trees as they felled ancient pines. Among them was Elias Thorne, a broad-shouldered lumberjack with a determined gaze. Unlike most who saw Alaska as a means to an end, gold, fortune, and easier life elsewhere, Elias saw a home. He had built his isolated cabin with his own hands, log by log, deep in the forest, dreaming of a life of peace and simplicity. But Elias's dream seemed to be an affront to the other loggers. While many sought robust and fertile wives, women who could withstand the rigors of frontier life and fill a house with children, Elias made a choice that provoked laughter and whispers. He had brought Clara, a delicate and frail woman from the distant civilization. Her eyes were expressive, but her body was small, and the rumor of her supposed barrenness ran rampant among the whiskey-fueled gossip. "A barren bride for a stubborn lumberjack," they scoffed. "What will he do with a woman who can't give him heirs to help with the work?" The weather was changing drastically, and a violent blizzard, much earlier than expected, began to blanket the landscape, adding an extra layer of challenge to Clara's arrival. The wind howled like a hungry wolf, whipping the snow into blinding eddies, and the cold penetrated their bones. As they reached the cabin, the air was thick with icy dampness, and nightfall was quickly approaching. Clara shivered, not just from the cold that lashed her face, but from the feeling of being so incredibly far from everything she knew. The cabin, though sturdy, seemed like a tiny island in a sea of desolation. Elias noticed her trembling. His own shoulders, accustomed to the weight of logs, now bore the weight of a different responsibility. He lit the fire in the hearth, the flame dancing and casting flickering shadows on the log walls, a small beacon of warmth in the vast, unforgiving cold. He knew the other's laughter was a dark cloud hanging over them, but his steady gaze met hers, conveying a silent promise that, together, they would face whatever came. Clara, despite the exhaustion of the long journey and the immensity of Alaska, felt an unexpected warmth spread in her chest, a small flame of hope against the chill that surrounded them. The cabin, however simple, would begin to transform under her hands, but the path would be arduous and full of challenges that would test the strength of their love and resilience. If you enjoyed this beginning, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next chapters of this exciting journey. The blizzard raged for 3 days, trapping Elias and Clara within the confines of their small cabin. Outside, the world was a canvas of white, an unbroken expanse of snow and ice. Inside, Clara, accustomed to the comforts of a bustling town, found herself confronting the raw reality of frontier life. The silence, broken only by the howling wind and the crackle of the fire, was deafening. Every chore was a lesson in survival. She learned to mend Elias's rugged clothes with nimble fingers, to stretch their meager provisions into hearty meals, and to tend the fire with a vigilance she never knew she possessed. The warmth of the hearth became her sanctuary, a pulsating heart in the frozen wilderness. Elias watched her, a quiet admiration growing within him. He saw not the frail woman the others whispered about, but a spirit of quiet determination. He taught her to load his rifle, to identify edible berries from the poisonous ones, though none were to be found in winter, and how to read the subtle signs of the forest. Their conversations were sparse, born of necessity rather than leisure, but each shared task, each quiet moment by the fire, wove a stronger thread between them. The initial awkwardness that had hung between them like the Alaskan mist slowly dissipated. They were two souls, isolated by choice and circumstance, finding a new rhythm together. Clara, in turn, began to see beyond Elias's stoic exterior. She saw the lines of exhaustion around his eyes, the subtle tenderness in his touch when he helped her with a heavy log, the quiet pride he took in their little home. The laughter of the other loggers, once a painful sting, now seemed distant, swallowed by the vast silence of the wilderness and the growing understanding between husband and wife. As the blizzard finally relented, leaving behind a sparkling, untouched world, Elias returned to his work in the logging camp. Clara, however, found her purpose within the cabin's walls. The small space, once a symbol of her isolation, slowly transformed under her touch. She salvaged old pieces of wood, crafting shelves and a small, sturdy table. She discovered a forgotten packet of seeds in Elias's supply chest, hardy varieties meant for short Alaskan summers. With meticulous care, she began a small indoor garden by the single window, nurturing delicate sprouts against the lingering chill. The tiny green shoots were a testament to her quiet defiance, a symbol of life blossoming where others saw only barrenness. Her efforts did not go unnoticed. When Elias returned from the camp, weary and frosted, he found a cabin subtly changed. The air was no longer just of wood smoke, but carried the faint, fresh scent of burgeoning life. He saw the care in her movements, the gentle way she watered the tiny plants. The other loggers continued their crude jokes and pitying glances, especially when Elias brought Clara's simple, yet surprisingly delicious meals to the shared campfire. They still saw a delicate woman, unfit for their harsh world. But Elias saw something more profound. He saw a resilience that blossomed in the face of adversity, a quiet strength that transcended physical stature. Clara's spirit was like the tenacious Alaskan wildflowers, finding a way to bloom even in the harshest conditions. This growing respect, unspoken yet deeply felt, formed the bedrock of their evolving bond. Spring arrived hesitantly in Willow Creek, thawing the frozen earth with slow, deliberate warmth. With the melting snow, the rumors about Clara intensified. The loggers, now back to their full schedule, often gathered in the evenings, their voices carrying across the camp. "Still no signs of a child, eh, Elias?" One would jeer, their words laced with a cruel curiosity. Another would add, "A cabin needs life, Elias, not just a pretty face." The whispers about Clara's perceived inability to bear children became louder, transforming from casual gossip into pointed, mocking taunts. Elias felt the sting of their words, a knot of frustration tightening in his chest. He saw the way Clara's shoulders subtly stiffened when a loud burst of laughter erupted from the camp, even if she pretended not to hear. Clara, though outwardly composed, felt the weight of their judgment. She knew the societal expectations placed upon women, especially in a frontier setting where large families were a necessity for survival and labor. The lack of a child, something beyond her control, was a source of private sorrow and public shame. She poured herself into making their cabin a true home, a sanctuary against the harsh judgments of the outside world. She wove intricate patterns into rough blankets, transforming coarse wool into comforting warmth. She kept their small vegetable patch meticulously tended, coaxing growth from the reluctant Alaskan soil. Elias, seeing her silent struggle, grew increasingly protective. He often found himself making excuses to return to the cabin, preferring Clara's quiet companionship to the boisterous, often cruel camaraderie of the camp. He began to subtly defend her, not with words, but with his presence, his unwavering support. The laughter of the others, once a source of humiliation, now fueled a quiet determination within both of them, to prove that a home was more than just offspring, and a woman's worth was not defined by her fertility. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more compelling stories like this one. Summer in Alaska was a fleeting, vibrant burst of life. The days were long, almost endless, the sun lingering above the horizon for hours, pouring light and warmth onto the land. Clara's small garden, meticulously tended, flourished beyond expectation. Root vegetables, hardy greens, and even a few stubborn berry bushes bore fruit. The yield was modest by farming standards, but to Elias it was a miracle. He watched, fascinated, as Clara harvested their bounty, her hands stained with earth, a quiet triumph in her eyes. This was a different kind of harvest, one that spoke not of brute strength, but of patience, foresight, and a profound connection to the land. One evening, a small group of their neighbors, a family new to Willow Creek, were struggling. Their own garden had failed, and the wife, pale and thin, was clearly unwell. Elias, observing their plight, felt a pang of unease. He knew the harsh realities of scarcity in this isolated land. Without a word, Clara, who had overheard the hushed conversation, filled a basket with their freshest vegetables, plump carrots, crisp lettuce, and a handful of precious berries. She offered it to the struggling family with a gentle smile, her eyes filled with genuine empathy. The woman, tears welling up, gratefully accepted the offering. Elias, watching this exchange, felt a profound shift within himself. He had seen Clara's quiet strength before, but this act of spontaneous generosity, born from her own meticulous labor, revealed a depth of character that surpassed any physical expectation. It was clear that Clara was cultivating more than just vegetables. She was cultivating community, resilience, and a silent, powerful dignity that would slowly, but surely, earn the respect of others. As autumn painted the Alaskan landscape in hues of gold and crimson, the loggers of Willow Creek faced a new, insidious challenge. A relentless series of unexpected equipment breakdowns. It wasn't just an isolated incident, it was a cascade. Axes snapped with alarming frequency, their keen edges dulling too quickly against the tough timber. Saws jammed, their teeth refusing to bite, forcing frustrating delays. Even their lone, invaluable oxen team, crucial for hauling the massive logs from the dense forest to the river, fell mysteriously ill, their strength waning with each passing day. Production slowed to a crawl, the rhythmic thud of axes replaced by the anxious murmurs of the men. Their meager livelihoods, already precarious in this harsh environment, hung by a thread. Despair settled over the camp like the heavy autumn mist, chilling their resolve more than any frost. Amidst the growing anxiety, Clara, with her keen eye for detail and surprising practical sense, began to notice subtle patterns the men overlooked. While Elias and the others focused on the immediate, tangible problem of broken tools and sick animals, Clara observed the less obvious. She saw the slight, almost imperceptible signs of wear on the tools before they failed completely. The minute wobble in an axe handle, the subtly off-kilter swing of an axe that indicated an imbalanced head, the peculiar high-pitched grinding sound of a saw blade long before it truly jammed. Drawing on her less conventional upbringing, where her father, a skilled artisan, had taught her the importance of meticulous care for tools and the intricate mechanics of simple machines, Clara began to quietly offer suggestions to Elias. "The axe head needs sharpening at a different angle, Elias," she might say softly, her voice carrying a quiet certainty. Or, seeing a man struggling, "Perhaps the saw blade has a slight bend that's causing the jam. It might need to be straightened." Initially, Elias, like the others, was skeptical. What could a woman, particularly one perceived as frail, know about the brute work of logging? But out of sheer desperation, he began to cautiously try her advice. To his astonishment, her observations proved remarkably accurate. The tools, once temperamental and prone to failure, began to work with renewed efficiency, their blades biting cleaner, their movements smoother. And the oxen, under Clara's gentle care and with the application of an old family remedy she recalled for their ailment, a poultice of local herbs she carefully identified and crushed, slowly began to recover their strength, their breathing easing, their eyes regaining their clear light. The other loggers, though still reluctant to directly acknowledge Clara's contribution, couldn't deny the undeniable improvement in their productivity and the health of their team. Whispers of "Elias's woman has a strange way with things" replaced the mocking jeers, a grudging recognition in their tone. Elias, witnessing Clara's quiet competence and the subtle yet profound impact she was having on their very survival, felt a surge of pride unlike any he had known. He realized that her value extended far beyond the traditional roles, weaving unseen threads of efficiency and quiet wisdom into the very fabric of their challenging existence, strengthening it from within. Winter returned to Willow Creek with its characteristic icy embrace, but this time the cabin felt profoundly different. It was no longer just a rudimentary shelter against the elements, but a warm, living sanctuary, a tangible testament to their shared resilience and burgeoning companionship. The food stores were abundant, their shelves laden with dried berries, preserved meats, and the hearty root vegetables Elias and Clara had harvested, a direct and undeniable result of Clara's tireless efforts in the garden. The cabin was consistently warm, insulated not just by its sturdy logs, but by the deep, quiet comfort that had grown steadily between Elias and Clara, a warmth that radiated from within. The mocking laughter that had once drifted from the logging camp had diminished significantly, almost entirely, replaced by a grudging respect that permeated the air whenever Clara's name was mentioned. The men had seen her unwavering work ethic, her remarkable resourcefulness, and perhaps most importantly, the genuine kindness she extended to those in need, a stark contrast to their often hardened existences. One particularly harsh evening, when the wind howled like a banshee and the snow fell thick and fast, a young logger, barely more than a boy, stumbled through the deepening drifts to their cabin door. His face was flushed, his movements uncoordinated. He was ill, delirious with fever, and had nowhere else to go. Without a moment's hesitation, Clara opened their door and took him in, her expression one of immediate concern, not fear. She tended to him with a gentle yet surprisingly strong will. She brewed medicinal teas from the various herbs she had carefully foraged and dried during the summer months, cooled his fevered brow with cloths dipped in fresh, snow-melted water, and nursed him back to health over several painstaking days and nights, barely sleeping. Elias, watching her tireless dedication, saw the undeniable depth of her compassion. This was not a performance for an audience. It was her true, unwavering nature. When the young logger finally recovered enough to sit up, his eyes clear and with a shaky voice, thanked Clara profusely, Elias felt an overwhelming sense of pride swelling in his chest. He saw the respect in the young man's eyes, a genuine admiration that transcended all the earlier prejudice and baseless rumors. The other loggers, hearing of Clara's selfless kindness and her skill in healing, began to see her not as the barren bride about whom they had once cruelly gossiped, but as a woman of quiet strength and unwavering humanity, an unexpected pillar of their isolated community. The whispers had finally turned, not into effusive praise, but into a silent understanding that Clara, in her own unique and powerful way, was just as vital to their harsh world as any man with an axe. The cruel laughter had ceased entirely, replaced by a newfound quietude, a profound recognition of her true worth. Despite the rapidly growing respect from the community and the burgeoning warmth in her marriage, Clara carried a silent burden, the unresolved grief and lingering pain of her past. She had left her home under difficult circumstances, carrying the heavy weight of familial disappointment and the stinging rebuke of societal judgment regarding her perceived inability to bear children. This personal sorrow, often suppressed, sometimes resurfaced in unexpected moments. One particularly cold afternoon, while meticulously mending one of Elias's torn shirts, Her fingers brushed against something hidden in a small, expertly sewn pocket she hadn't noticed before. It was a small, exquisitely embroidered handkerchief, a delicate piece of linen, clearly not of her own making. The intricate stitches and fine fabric stirred a sudden, overwhelming wave of homesickness and sorrow within her. Tears, long held back by sheer force of will and the demands of survival, finally welled in her eyes, blurring the needlework she held. Elias, returning earlier than usual from the camp, his boots crunching softly on the snow-covered porch, found her weeping softly, the embroidered handkerchief clutched tightly in her hand. He knelt beside her, his large, calloused hand gently covering hers, offering a silent anchor. He didn't ask questions, didn't demand explanations, sensing the raw vulnerability in her. He simply sat with her, offering the profound, silent comfort of his presence, a steady, unwavering support. In that moment of profound shared vulnerability, with the crackle of the fire the only sound beyond her own quiet sobs, Clara, through choked tears and halting words, finally spoke of her past. She spoke of the crushing expectations placed upon her, the searing pain of being unable to fulfill them, of the deep-seated desire for a child that had gone unfulfilled. She recounted her family's veiled criticisms, the constant unspoken disappointment, and the feeling of being an outcast, even before she had ever set foot in Alaska. Elias listened intently, his rugged face etched with deep empathy, his gaze never leaving hers. He didn't try to offer easy solutions or empty reassurances. Instead, with a quiet strength that was uniquely his, he simply affirmed her worth, not for what she could produce or for what society dictated, but for who she was: resilient, kind, intelligent, and profoundly capable. This shared moment, this shedding of her past burdens into his understanding, accepting embrace, deepened their connection in a way that countless words or grand gestures never could. It was a quiet, powerful affirmation that, in this vast, frozen land, she had found not just a husband, but a true partner, someone who saw beyond the surface and embraced the entirety of her being, flaws and all. As spring once again began to coax life from the frozen earth, a new, unforeseen, and truly devastating challenge struck Willow Creek. A severe drought, unprecedented for the region and wholly unexpected, threatened to utterly decimate the logging industry. The mighty river, which was not just a natural landmark, but the crucial artery for transporting logs downriver to the distant mills, began to visibly dwindle, shrinking day by day until it became a muddy trickle, barely deep enough to float a stick, let alone a massive log. Panic began to set in among the loggers, their faces etched with growing fear. Their livelihoods, their very survival in this isolated place, depended entirely on the river's flow. Elias, along with the other men, worked tirelessly, their muscles aching, trying everything they knew. They attempted to deepen the riverbed with shovels and picks to divert what little water remained from smaller tributaries, but their arduous efforts were tragically insufficient against the relentless, parching dryness. Despair was a tangible presence in the camp, thicker than any fog. Clara, having observed the subtle shifts in the landscape and recalling old stories from her childhood about water conservation techniques used in drier lands, had an audacious idea. It was unconventional, requiring not only careful planning, but also the willing cooperation of the entire community, something difficult to achieve among such independent men. She proposed building a series of small, temporary dams and diversion channels further upstream in the network of smaller creeks that fed into the main river. These would create shallow, controlled pools that would slowly release water into the main river channel in a regulated flow, just enough to allow the logs to float. Initially, as expected, the loggers scoffed. A woman's idea about logging, about their river, the very notion seemed absurd. But the desperation was palpable. a cold fear that outweighed their ingrained prejudices, and Elias, recalling Clara's previous, accurate insights and her quiet competence, urged them to listen, his voice carrying the weight of his respect for her. With Elias's unwavering support, Clara, drawing sketches in the dirt with a stick, laid out her plan, explaining the mechanics and the flow of water with surprising clarity and precision. Reluctantly, seeing no other viable option, the men agreed to try. Under Clara's precise guidance, directing the placement of rocks and the digging of channels, and with Elias coordinating the manual labor, the entire community began to work. Day after day, they toiled together under the Alaskan sun, digging, moving heavy rocks, and building makeshift dams from timber and earth. Slowly, painstakingly, the river began to rise just enough. The logs, once stranded and useless, began to move sluggishly, then steadily flowing downriver. The collective effort, spearheaded by Clara's ingenious solution and Elias's profound faith in her capabilities, had miraculously saved their livelihood. The loggers, witnessing her brilliant practical solution with their own eyes, no longer saw a barren bride, but a valuable, indispensable member of their community, a woman who had saved them all. The strength of two, working as one, had overcome an insurmountable obstacle, proving that true value lay beyond traditional expectations. The river flowed, the logs were delivered, and the immediate crisis passed. But the events of the drought left an indelible mark on Willow Creek. The community, once fractured by gossip and prejudice, by harsh judgments and isolated lives, had been forged stronger by shared adversity. The fight against the drought, united under Clara's unlikely leadership, had shown them the power of cooperation and the folly of narrow-mindedness. Elias and Clara's cabin, once a distant symbol of Elias's quiet defiance and Clara's perceived isolation, had become something more. It was now a hub of quiet activity, a place where people increasingly sought advice, shared their worries, and found genuine connection and camaraderie. Clara's garden continued to thrive, providing not just for their own needs, but for others in lean times, a testament to her ongoing generosity. Her small, resourceful hands had not only cultivated the reluctant Alaskan land, but had subtly sown seeds of respect and understanding within the community itself, fostering a sense of interdependence they hadn't known before. The crude laughter of the loggers, once a piercing reminder of their judgments, had long since ceased. In its place was a quiet deference, a respectful nod of acknowledgement when they passed Clara on the dusty path, a genuinely respectful, "Good day, Mrs. Thorne." They saw now what Elias had seen all along, and what they had stubbornly refused to acknowledge, a woman of profound strength, quiet intelligence, unwavering kindness, and remarkable practical skill. They had laughed at the lumberjack for choosing a barren bride, mocking his unconventional choice. But Clara, through her actions, through her very being, had proven them all profoundly wrong. She had not only made his frozen cabin a warm, inviting home, she had, in her quiet, persistent way, warmed the hearts of an entire community, thawing their prejudices as surely as spring thawed the ice. Their life, though still challenging and demanding in the Alaskan wilderness, was now filled with a deep, abiding contentment, a quiet joy born of mutual respect and shared purpose. Elias and Clara, hand in hand, often stood on the porch of their modest cabin, watching the sunset paint the vast Alaskan sky in fiery hues of orange, purple, and gold. The silence that enveloped them was no longer empty or isolating, but filled with the quiet hum of their shared life, a profound testament to resilience, enduring love, and the undeniable truth that a home is built not just with logs, but with the unwavering spirit of those who inhabit it and the deep connections forged in the crucible of shared challenges. They built a legacy not of bloodlines, but of unwavering commitment to each other and to their community, a bond stronger than any winter storm. Thank you for watching this story. If you were moved by Elias and Clara's journey and their inspiring triumph against adversity, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more compelling tales of human strength and resilience.